The Denver morning hung heavy. The kind of quiet that feels like the world's holding its breath. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting frail golden streaks across the dusty oak dresser in Ellie Harper's bedroom. At 29, Ellie sat on the edge of her bed, one sneaker untied, her fingers tracing the hem of her faded flannel shirt. Today marked 3 years since the world cracked open, 3 years since her fiancé, Caleb Monroe, left her with nothing but a voicemail about grabbing her favorite cherry pie from the diner. Grief had dulled its claws since that first brutal spring, but it lingered, sharp and silent, in the spaces between her heartbeats. Ellie reached for the second drawer of her nightstand, where a small cedar box always waited. Inside was the engagement ring she and Caleb had designed together, a 4.2-carat emerald-cut diamond set in rose gold, engraved with a promise only they knew. It was her ritual, her anchor, to open that box on days like this. Her fingers found the drawer's familiar groove, the soft creak of wood a comfort. But when it slid open, the box was gone. No velvet lining, no glint of gold, just a crumpled receipt, a half-burned candle, and a void that hit like a punch. She blinked, digging deeper, shoving aside tissues and old pens. Nothing. Ellie stood, her pulse quickening, and tore through the other drawers, socks, journals, loose change. No box, no ring. Her chest tightened, not with panic but with a cold, creeping certainty. This wasn't a mistake. She stumbled downstairs, one sneaker still untied, her hand gripping the banister like it could keep her from falling apart. In the kitchen, her mother, Diane Harper, leaned against the counter, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped the screen, oblivious to the storm brewing in Ellie's chest. "Morning, hun," Diane said, not looking up. "Mom." Ellie forced her voice steady. "Where's my ring?" Diane's scrolling paused. She glanced up, her blue eyes narrowing slightly, like Ellie had asked about a misplaced sock. "What ring?" Ellie's jaw clenched. "My ring. Caleb's ring. The engagement ring." "Oh." Diane set her phone down, her tone flat as expired milk. We sold it." The air vanished from the room. Ellie's breath caught, her vision tunneling. "You what?" Diane stirred her coffee, gazing out the window at the thawing Denver skyline. Sienna needed funds for her wellness retreat in Sedona. "Soul-searching. You know, you haven't worn that ring in years." Ellie's knees buckled, but she stayed upright, gripping the counter's edge. That ring wasn't just jewelry. It was Caleb, late nights sketching the band's curve. His laugh when they picked the diamond. The engraved words he'd whispered to her under a Utah starry sky. It was the last piece of him she could touch. After he collapsed in a parking lot. Pie box still in his hand. "You sold it?" she repeated, her voice a frayed thread. Her father, Tom Harper, stepped into the kitchen, his arms crossed, his graying beard framing a familiar frown. "You haven't touched it in months." "Ellie, we figured you'd moved on." Ellie stared at them, words piling up behind her ribs. "Too heavy to escape. You sold something that wasn't yours," she said, her voice sharper than she meant. "That ring was mine. Caleb and I designed it. He had it engraved." Diane sighed, rolling her eyes. "Ellie, come on. You're not getting married anymore. Let it go." She said it like a quip. Like Caleb had just run to the store. Not left a voicemail she still listened to when the nights got too quiet. "He's dead, not forgotten," Ellie snapped, her voice cracking on the last word. Diane's face tightened, her default look when emotions dared to surface. "Sienna's chasing her truth. That retreat's changing her life." "Then she should have sold her own stuff," Ellie whispered, barely audible. "Sienna doesn't have anything like that," Tom muttered. "And you weren't using it." Ellie stepped back, the room tilting. They hadn't just sold a ring. They'd sold the last tether to Caleb. The proof he'd once asked her to be his forever. She turned, her footsteps heavy on the stairs, each one echoing like a slammed door. Back in her room, she yanked the drawer open again, desperate for this to be a nightmare. But the emptiness stared back. Then she saw it, tucked in the corner, folded like an afterthought, a navy velvet cloth, embroidered with tiny white daisies, now limp without the ring it once cradled. Ellie sank to the floor. The cloth in her lap. Her fingers traced the stitches. Memories flooding in. Caleb had loved daisies. Said they reminded him of their first road trip. When they'd pulled over to a field in Wyoming. Laughing under a sky too big for words. She sat there. Maybe an hour. Maybe more. Just her. The empty drawer. And the daisy-stitched cloth. Outside, the sky shifted to a pale blue. Clouds drifting like nothing had changed. But something in Ellie had stopped. Her voice came, low and steady, speaking to no one. They didn't just sell a ring. They sold what's left of me. By Sunday, Ellie hadn't left her room. She hadn't eaten much either, just water and a stale granola bar she found in her bag. Her phone stayed off, not because she was ready to face the world, but because she was terrified of it. Terrified of texts from Diane begging her to be reasonable, or worse, from Sienna, acting like she didn't know what she'd done. But silence was heavier than fear. So she powered it on. The screen flared, and her stomach twisted. There was Sienna, on Instagram, posing on a red rock cliff in Sedona. Arms raised in a curated surrender to the universe. The caption read, "Healing costs. But it's worth every penny. Grateful for my family's love." A heart emoji. A cactus. Comments poured in. "You're glowing. Such a brave soul. This is what healing looks like." Ellie's hand shook as she scrolled. Sienna's posts got worse. Stories tagged by wellness brands. A blog post titled From Trauma to Triumph. Sienna Harper's Journey. It rambled about breaking free from family dysfunction. Never mentioning Ellie. Not once. Not even a whisper of the ring that paid for that sunlit transformation. Ellie's grief. Her love. Had been erased. Repackaged as Sienna's redemption arc. She didn't cry. That scared her more than anything. The grief had nowhere left to go. Ellie scrolled until her eyes burned. Flashes of her childhood with Sienna flickering like a bad movie. The tantrums. The slammed doors. Diane's tired voice. "Ellie. You're the strong one. Keep the peace." Caleb used to say, "You don't have to hold the house together while it burns." But she hadn't held it well enough. Because now Sienna was dancing in the flames. And Ellie was the ashes. That night, she drove to the cemetery. The wind sharp against her face as she pushed through the creaking gate. She stood at Caleb's headstone. Her phone and the velvet cloth her only companions. "They sold your ring, Caleb," she whispered, for her to post gratitude quotes in Sedona. The wind stirred the dry leaves at her feet. And something in her cracked a little more. Back home, Ellie sat on the floor, scrolling Sienna's latest post, a drone shot over desert cliffs. Her arms outstretched. Caption. "Leave the noise to find your soul." Without thinking, Ellie typed. "Hope the healing was worth it. I paid for it." She hit send. 10 minutes later, the comment was gone. Deleted. Then her phone buzzed. "Diane. Let your sister have her moment. Don't start drama." Drama. That's what they called it. Not betrayal. Not erasure. Drama. Ellie didn't reply. She just stared at the screen, rereading the message until the words blurred. Grief wasn't loud sobs or slammed doors. It was this, being erased while the world clapped for the one holding the eraser. The Metbrook Center glowed under a Denver sunset, its glass walls catching the last amber rays like a beacon. Inside, the "Reclaiming What Was Always Yours" gala hummed with quiet elegance, candlelight flickering in glass bowls. White daisies floating on water. A deliberate choice Ellie Harper had made. At 29, Ellie stood in the corner of the event she'd secretly funded in memory of her late fiancé, Caleb Monroe. No one knew her name was behind the foundation. The E&C Trust, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Her black dress hugged her frame. Simple, unadorned. Her only accessory a small clutch pressed against her ribs. Inside it, folded carefully, was the navy velvet cloth embroidered with daisies, the one that once held the $590 engagement ring her family sold. Ellie's eyes scanned the room. Her mother, Diane Harper, glided through the crowd, arm linked with Ellie's younger sister, Sienna, 27, who shimmered in a custom white gown. Her auburn hair pinned in artful waves. "You deserve this, darling," Diane's voice carried, loud enough to turn heads at the champagne table. Sienna smiled, her poise rehearsed. Every step a performance. Ellie stayed still, unnoticed. Her pulse steady but her fingers tight around her clutch. She'd spent months planning this night, funneling money into floral arrangements, speaker stipends, and signage, all to honor Caleb's belief that legacy was a ripple, not a name. Tonight, that ripple would hit like a wave. The music softened, and the host, a woman in a sharp blazer, took the stage. We're thrilled to introduce a surprise guest speaker. A voice of resilience, Sienna Harper. Polite applause rippled through the room. Diane's face lit up, her hand brushing Sienna's arm like a proud coach. Sienna stepped forward, her heels clicking, her smile radiant under the spotlight. Grief, she began, her voice smooth as a podcast intro. As a journey, but some people wear it like a badge they refuse to take off. Ellie's grip on her clutch tightened. Every word was a veiled jab, a shadow cast in her direction. Sienna continued, her eyes sweeping the crowd but never landing on Ellie. I had to release things that tied me to darkness, objects, expectations, even family wounds. I chose light. The audience nodded, some murmuring approval, their wine glasses glinting. Ellie's jaw clenched. Sienna was rewriting her story, turning Caleb's ring, sold to fund her Sedona retreat, into a metaphor for toxic baggage. Ellie's grief, her love, reduced to a soundbite. She moved quietly, slipping through the crowd to the event coordinator, a young woman with a headset and a clipboard. Excuse me, Ellie said, her voice low but firm, handing over a sealed envelope. This is a featured donor message. It needs to play now. Before the final speaker, the coordinator hesitated, her brow furrowing. I wasn't told. Check the card inside. Ellie cut in, her tone calm but unyielding. The coordinator opened it, scanned the note, and nodded. Okay, I'll cue it. Ellie returned to her corner, her heart a steady drum. Sienna was wrapping up, thanking the organizers, the city, the brave women here who've overcome so much. The applause swelled, then stopped. The house lights dimmed, the screen behind the stage flickered to black, and white text faded in memory of Caleb Monroe. A hush fell, heavy as snow. The video began. Ellie's face appeared, filmed in a quiet room, her voice clear and unshaking. My name is Ellie Harper. I don't need recognition tonight. I already had what mattered. And I lost it. Heads turned, whispers stirring. 3 years ago, I buried my fiancé. We picked out a ring together. A symbol of our future. It was taken, sold, without my knowledge. That ring didn't just represent a promise, it held grief, memory, and love. The screen shifted to a photo. Ellie and Caleb, laughing, her hand in his, the ring glinting faintly. I funded this gala in his name. She continued, the theme, reclaiming what was always yours, isn't just about leadership. It's about memory and truth. Sometimes, the ones who suffer most are expected to stay silent so the loudest can heal. The screen faded to black. The room froze. A collective breath held too long. Diane's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Sienna, still near the stage, stood rigid, her smile gone, her face caught between confusion and fear. A photographer's flash popped, freezing her expression. Whispers broke the silence. She paid for this? That was her fiancé. Ellie didn't wait for the fallout. She walked to the exit, her steps deliberate, the cold night air hitting her like a release. She didn't need applause. She needed them to hear the truth in a room that couldn't look away. The next morning, Ellie's phone was a war zone. 47 unread texts, 15 missed calls, notifications piling up like debris. She opened Instagram. Sienna's latest story filled the screen. Her eyes artfully teary, her voice trembling. I was ambushed last night. That gala was supposed to celebrate healing, not become an attack. My sister turned it into a vendetta. Another slide. She's weaponizing grief. I tried to include her. But sometimes family is your worst enemy. Comments flooded in. So sad. She needs help. Your sister sounds toxic. Twitter was worse. Local blogs spun Sienna's narrative. Resilience coach sabotaged by family drama. A text from Diane. You've torn this family apart. Happy now? Then a missed call from Tom. No voicemail. Just silence. Ellie blocked them both. A message from an old friend. Nate. Cut through the noise. Don't let them steal the last word. You're stronger than their lies. Ellie pulled on jeans and a navy sweater, slipping the velvet cloth into her jacket pocket alongside a printed transcript. She drove to the Harper family home, the route etched in muscle memory, though it hadn't felt like home in years. The front door was ajar, as if daring her to cross the threshold. Inside, Sienna paced the living room, phone in hand, her voice sharp as she rehearsed damage control, emotional abuse. My journey. She froze when she saw Ellie, her eyes narrowing. You shouldn't be here. I won't be long, Ellie said, calm as stone. She set the transcript on the coffee table, the paper heavy with truth. Beneath it, she placed the velvet cloth. Unfolded, its daisies stark against the wood. This is your voice, Ellie said, from the podcast where you called me a grief addict. Sienna's face drained of color, her lips parting but no words coming. You don't understand media, she stammered. I understand truth, Ellie replied, her gaze unflinching. She stood a moment longer, letting the silence bite, then turned. Diane appeared in the hallway, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. We're family, Ellie. Blood. Ellie stopped, not from doubt but from clarity. Blood means nothing without respect. I'm not here to belong anymore. I'm here to break the cycle. She walked out, the Denver air crisp, a thin band of sunlight breaking through the clouds. The velvet cloth felt lighter in her pocket, like a weight finally shed. Ellie didn't leave because she hated them. She left because she loved herself more. Months later, Napa's morning light was softer, warmer, wrapping the hills in a gentle glow. Ellie, now 30, turned the key in her new studio's door. The sign overhead catching the sun, Monroe and Harper. Crafted with memory. The space was small but alive, wood floors, brass fixtures, tools lined like soldiers, pliers, molds, a flame torch. The smell of heated metal filled the air, a mix of hope and finality. Foot traffic was steady, couples seeking wedding bands, a widow wanting her husband's locket set into a ring. Some locals whispered, "You're the gala woman, right?" Ellie just nodded, her smile quiet. In the back, under a soft spotlight, a glass case held the velvet cloth, folded perfectly, and a new ring, diamond and steel, etched with a single daisy. A note beneath read, "This piece is not for sale. It cost everything to make." One day, a girl, maybe 7, pressed her nose to the glass. "Who made that?" she asked. Ellie crouched beside her. "Someone who used to be silent." The girl's brows scrunched. "Is she better now?" Ellie's smile was real, soft. "She's learning, but she's not silent anymore." A message came from an old friend. "Lila, saw your gala video. Diane keeps it on her desktop. Never told anyone." Ellie read it twice, then let it go. Apologies didn't need words, and she didn't need to wait for them. She walked to her workbench, where Caleb's last note lay beside the ring's original receipt. "Don't let them take your voice or your worth." Outside, Napa's sun spilled over the cobblestones. Ellie turned the studio's sign to open, the folk song on her stereo humming low. She didn't know the words, but the melody felt like home. The cloth under the glass no longer held a lost future. It held her.